Hi, my name is Ellen Cookman, and today we're going to be talking about the many duties and responsibilities of trustees. I hope this will open your eyes to who's the best person to act as trustee, and also if you've been named as trustee, what does that mean for you as well? Okay, so perhaps somebody's asked you if you could act as trustee of their trust when they're sick. Or maybe somebody's talked with you about a trust protector. What are these roles, and why might you be playing a role in this situation? So I like thinking of a trustee as a fiduciary. This is somebody who has lots of responsibilities, and it's all laid out in the probate code. The California Probate Code is basically the group of rules that governs probates and also governs trusts. Trustees have many duties under the law, and we'll actually go through each of those duties. But you really want to get it right if you're the trustee, or you can get sued. So as we talk about the role of a trustee, we have to understand what's the overall responsibility. And a lot of times you might manage a trust that is intended to last for a short period of time. Maybe you're a successor trustee of a revocable trust. So upon your parents' death, you take over as trustee, but really your role is just to wrap things up and distribute the assets where they're supposed to go. Then there's the trustees acting as a trust of a much longer period of time. And this can be a lot more complex. This might be acting as trustee for a dynasty trust or a special needs trust, perhaps a trust for the person's entire lifetime. So you got to think carefully as we describe the trustee duties and responsibilities, whether you're really up for that type of role for the duration. So there's 8 different types of fiduciaries that I just want to mention first, so you can see which fiduciary or responsible person in a role of trust, which role am I being asked to do? So the first role is the successor trustee of a revocable trust. That's a trust that's the most common trust out there. It's set up, somebody takes over as trustee if the settlor, the person creating the trust, is sick or upon their death. Again, that's the wrap-up role I just talked about. It's a little bit shorter. Another fiduciary role is the role of executor. Okay, this is the executor of a will. Now, when we're doing an estate plan with a trust, usually the will is not nearly as important. We call it a pour-over will, all right? But the person who manages the will, they're called the executor. And I do have a good video about the difference between a trust and a will, so feel free to circle back to that one. Another role as fiduciary is the attorney in fact of a power of attorney for managing finances. Now, I think this is a horrible name. Attorney, in fact, this is not naming an attorney. And in fact, it's not naming an attorney. It's instead you're naming a family member who can sign on your behalf if you're sick or upon your death. So you can see that's another fiduciary role. That's another role of responsibility. The fourth role is the agent under somebody's advanced healthcare directive. So that's the directive that somebody signs to say, if I'm in a coma or if I'm unconscious, this is what I want to be done. And this is the person who carries out or talks to the doctors about carrying out those wishes. Another fiduciary role, the fifth one, is acting as successor trustee of a special needs trust. Now that's very different than acting as successor trustee of a revocable trust, because a special needs trust typically lasts for their lifetime. The person who's benefiting from the trust is usually on needs-based public benefits. You need to make sure that distributions don't inhibit that. So there's a lot more responsibility, and it takes a much longer time, right? Because it lasts that person's lifetime. Another role is called the conservator of a limited conservatorship. So typically that if you have a disabled child, a child with developmental disabilities, you can take away their rights to manage things and you can manage things instead, and this goes through the court process. That's another role of a fiduciary. We also see fiduciaries as authorized agents to manage an ABLE account. Okay, so that's the authorized representative, and that's somebody who can sign and manage that ABLE account. Again, a fiduciary role. And finally, we have the fiduciary role of representative payee for somebody's supplemental security income statement. So that's someone who makes sure that the income stream, not huge, but helpful, from SSI is managed properly. So all 8 of those roles are fiduciary roles. Those are roles where you really need to name somebody that you trust. Sometimes you name the same person for all the roles, and sometimes you do not. Now I want to go through what types of responsibilities you have as trustee, and I have a handy dandy chart here So here are some of the many duties of trustee. And the first one you can see is to carry out the terms of the trust. So as trustee, you need to read the trust, understand what it says. Sometimes you have to get it translated by a lawyer, right? Understand what it says and then carry out those terms. A trust is like an instruction manual to the successor trustee. Please go and do these things. You can only delegate what we call ministerial duties. So those are smaller duties. When you make decisions about how overall the money should be invested, you work with a financial advisor perhaps, but you get to decide ultimately how the money is managed, and you're responsible for that. The responsibility, the buck stops with you. You're also required to keep beneficiaries updated on the different stages of where a trust administration is going and to provide them accountings in certain circumstances. Now, you're required to not use trust property for your own purposes. There's a rule against self-dealing. That's pretty strict. You are required as trustee to take possession of the trust property and to protect it. So for example, if there's a house out there, as trustee, you're supposed to secure the house, maybe change the locks, to make sure that nobody can use an old key to break in and steal things. Also keep the utilities going so that pipes don't, in the winter, they don't freeze and expand and burst. That's your responsibility. And in a similar way, you're supposed to safeguard the property against loss. So maybe you keep things in a safe, tangible personal property. You make sure that you're not investing money too strongly. Okay, that's really important too. You also need to maintain clear and accurate accounting. So that's basically what money started with you and then how that money has been used and now what money finishes with you, right? We want to know what's happening with the money. You have to determine what money is income versus what money is principal for distribution and for income tax purposes. And you're required to invest the trust property with skill and diligence. Okay, so no blowing through it or risking everything. And then I said, etc., because there's a lot more things. So here's where you can find it. You can go to California Probate Code, section 16220 through section 16449, and that lists all of the responsibilities of the trustee. Well, you may be thinking right now, that's ridiculous. Why would anybody want to be trustee? And I tend to agree with you. It kind of is a thankless job. So that's why there's professional fiduciaries out there who will act in this role, because it's really rife with litigation and it's really important. You want to get it right. And unfortunately, we just don't learn, managing trusts 101 when we take home ec and I had an auto shop class and driver's training all in high school. I think it would have been helpful to have a trusts 101 class, but we don't have that, so here we are. Okay, so another role that you have is to make sure that the money does not run out, all right? So especially when you're managing a trust for a lifetime, like a special needs trust, what happens if after 20 years, there's no more money? It's all been spent. Well, you could be liable for the beneficiary being out on the street. So you really need to make sure that you get it all correct. A good thing to do is to meet with a financial advisor and do something called financial projections, where you see how much do we really need if the beneficiary lives another 20 years, another 40 or 60 years. We want to make sure that there's enough money to last. And sometimes a beneficiary may not like this because they want to spend more money up front or buy a house or something like that. But as trustee, you know that you're responsible to the settlor of the trust, the person who first created it, and to the beneficiary. But really, I like to think of your client as the deceased settlor, the person who set all of this up. Okay, you're really trying to carry out the intent of their trust. So hopefully this video about the duties and responsibilities of trustees doesn't scare you off, but instead it makes you really think about the role and decide who is the best choice in your situation, and would you be the best choice in somebody else's situation. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you at the next video.